stepping back, loads up, looks long, throws, end zone, touchdown! Alabama! How about that? A.J. gets the snap, pressure, screen, Yeldon, 30, 25.
Make a man miss.
Right, he's gonna go!
Yes!
He's gonna go! Touchdown, T.J. Yeldon!
The fans are cheering with that feeling in their stomach that's hard to explain. Daniel Lincoln from 45 yards out to win it for the Volunteers. The snap, the spot. The kick is blocked! It's blocked by Alabama! It is blocked by Alabama! The Crimson Tide wins! The Crimson Tide wins!
That is the unmistakable sound of Eli Gold, one of the signature radio voices of college football. He's done 32 seasons as the voice of the Crimson Tide and is the most recent winner of the Chris Schenkel Award given away by the National Football Foundation and College Hall of Fame. That is for individuals who have had long, distinguished careers broadcasting college football with direct ties to a specific university. And I don't think you can think Alabama football without Eli Gold. Eli, appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on today. How are you?
I am well, thank you. It's a rainy day here in Birmingham, but hopefully you folks are having a good day in Arkansas.
We're doing very well today. We are hoping to see college football return during the fall, and all
amen to that.
Absolutely, life has changed quite a bit for us during these days. What's life for you these days? I know you live in Birmingham. Have you just been locked up like the rest of us? Have you been getting out?
Just like the rest of us. My wife and I are, staying home, staying to ourselves. We are lucky enough to own a little cottage at a nearby lake. So if we're not at this home, we do go and sit out and stare at the lake, but we're able to maintain plenty of social distancing. So, we have something we've never done before is, use one of these delivery services for groceries, one of the local chains here. You can call up and you can do your shopping online and they'll deliver it. So we've been doing that. We're just kind of doing our best to keep our distance from everybody. We have on our network, we've been repackaging some great games of the past. So I've been working on that, doing ins and outs, intros and outros, and some transitional lines and so on. We've had a couple of talk shows. We have another one coming up here in a few weeks. But again, those have originated for me from my home, and our guests have been on the phone from their respective homes or offices, Coach Saban and our Director of Athletics, Greg Byrne. But otherwise, I've been doing a good bit of reading, catching up on books that I have been gifted over the years that I just never got around to reading, and I've been doing a lot of that and just sitting around and, watching Perry Mason continue to beat up on Hamilton Burger.
Yep, and the endings remain the same.
It's amazing.
Eli and I have met a couple of times at Alabama baseball and women's basketball games because he works on the ESPN Plus telecast of those. I wanted to ask your opinion about something that I noticed over the weekend. This NASCAR race in Darlington, and I know you did a lot of NASCAR for 40 years. Their announcers were home. These KBO baseball games.
They were not at home. They were not at the track, but they were in a studio in Charlotte.
Okay.
So they were not at their homes. Mike Joy was in one studio. Next door in another studio was Jeff Gordon. The pregame folks were in 3 different studios in that same building. The only person who was actually on site of an announcing standpoint was Regan Smith, their pit reporter. And it was a very interesting telecast in that the producer and director, or the producer, I should say, and the pit producer were working out of that facility in Charlotte. The director and the technical director and the audio guy were working out of a truck that was at Darlington. And then everything else, the graphics, the commercials, all the other elements of the broadcast, but all the graphics were being done out of the Fox Broadcast Center in Los Angeles. So it was the only people at the track was one pit reporter, 3 guys in the truck, and 8 or 9 or 10 camera people and a couple of engineering maintenance guys. So they had a logistical issue to deal with themselves.
You're a native of New York, Brooklyn to be exact. How long have you lived in Alabama? Because I know you've been there longer than the time you've worked at with the Crimson Tide.
I came down here in 1977. Birmingham, I was a hockey broadcaster in New York at the time. Among other, I was born and raised there, but I had already started with NASCAR when I was in New York, and I was broadcasting hockey, and I wanted to do more. So when Birmingham got a hockey team in the old World Hockey Association, which was the rival major league to the NHL back in those days, when they got a team here in Birmingham, they put out an APB for a hockey announcer, and I got the job and I moved south. So I was here in '77. I then started doing other stuff as well. I did the St. Louis Blues games, but I continued to live in Birmingham. I worked baseball in the Detroit Tigers organization, but I continued to live in Birmingham. Then I started doing a talk show, and then the Bama job opened up in '88, and I was blessed to get the job. So, but yeah, I moved here in 1977.
I've wondered about this. I'm a Yankee myself from Pittsburgh. I've lived in Arkansas for 20 years, did minor league baseball 14 seasons, and I wondered if it would take a while to be accepted by Razorback fans because I'm not from here. I didn't have an association with the university. That's the same thing for you with Alabama. How long do you feel it took before
it took a while.
You might have been accepted?
It probably took 10 or 12 years. And maybe for some people even longer than that. I was a pro sports guy. I was a guy from New York, as you say. I had no ties to the university. So, yeah, it was probably 10, 12 years before I was accepted by some, if not many. So it was, it was a difficult time. There were people who thought it was terrible that I was selected to do the football games and the basketball games. People who threatened to stop their contributions to the university. People who were going to take the university out of their wills. People who had, willed the monies on a long-term basis. It was not pleasant, but thankfully the university stuck with me. And they did give me the chance to do the job, and here we are 32 years later. But yeah, it was not. But now, thank God, I'm accepted, and and everything's been good. But and I'm sure there's still some folks out there who don't like me. I mean, everybody doesn't ever like anyone. But it was a difficult start. It really was.
We're speaking to Eli Gold here on Halftime, the voice of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Eli, I'm curious, as a young broadcaster myself, who were some of your inspirations when you first started getting into sports broadcasting, whether it be with the NHL, NASCAR, into college football? Who were some of your inspirations as you were growing up?
Well, growing up in New York, I was a Yankees fan because the Yankees were the only team in New York in that time period. The Giants and Dodgers had left, and the Mets didn't show up until I guess I was 9 years old. So I was a Yankee fan, and as a result, listened to Mel Allen and Red Barber do the Yankee broadcasts, and I just loved listening to them on my little transistor radio. And the irony is, I was talking with some folks the other day, the irony is that Mel Allen, before becoming the voice of the Yankees, was actually the voice of the Alabama Crimson Tide. He grew up in Bessemer, Alabama, which is a western suburb of Birmingham, and went to the university and became the voice of the Crimson Tide before going up to New York. So I loved his work. In those days, Marv Albert was the radio voice of both the Knicks and the Rangers. He did every game. And I loved listening to Marv. He was superb. and just his work inspired me. There are a lot of guys who I've appreciated. There was a gentleman in New York by the name of Bob Wolf. Bob was an old baseball guy. He did Don Larson's Perfect Game on television. He did Nick's television, and I had gotten to meet him when I had a job at Madison Square Garden. And Bob, although I didn't necessarily, I respected his work, but he was the guy who took the time to listen to my tapes. I couldn't get to Mel Allen and Red Barber and Marv Albert, but Bob Wolf took the time to listen to my tapes, which were absolutely terrible, I might add. And he said to me, you're doing this well, you're doing this poorly, you need to work on this, you need to work on that, and so on and so forth. So he was a major helper, a major encourager as I grew up in New York City.
You've been all across the nation calling college football games. You've been obviously to every SEC school. What memories do you have, if any, that you have of coming to Fayetteville broadcasting like Arkansas versus Alabama?
Well, I remember actually one of the memories, although, and this is certainly not a political statement, but it was impactful at one time, when the only time in my 32 years that Bama played Arkansas in Little Rock, and then Governor Bill Clinton attended. And again, that's not a political commentary, other than he was running for president at the time, and it showed me how impactful, it further showed me how impactful college football was and is when a guy could take time out of his campaign schedule, although he's obviously a big Razorback fan. It showed me how impactful it was that he could take the time out and get the eyeballs that college football brought to him. So that was, no pun intended, an eye-opener for me. Otherwise, there have been a number of interesting games. Bama has done pretty well against the Razorbacks over the years. I've always enjoyed watching, Arkansas's running backs. They've had an outstanding group of them, and some hard runners and grinders as well, a Peyton Hillis kind of guy, whatever. But I don't know if there's any one game that stands out. Bama has had some fairly significant victories over the Razorbacks, both in Tuscaloosa and in Fayetteville. From a personal note, I remember sitting around, or standing around more appropriately put, and talking to John Daly a couple of times. And so it's always fun going in, and Mr. Eels and Mr. Nail and Mr. Schaefer, great friends from the broadcast crew that I always look forward to seeing. And of course, going to Herman's and eating some ribs is never bad. That's always a fun thing to do. So I always enjoy my trips into Fayetteville.
Eli, we'll leave it there. I appreciate you joining us. It's great to talk to you. I hope I see you during basketball season and baseball season as well.
Definitely.
Love listening to your work. It's a great conversation, and I hope you're doing well during this really crazy time.
Well, it is. It's great to be on with you, and to all of your listeners, folks. Take care of yourselves out there. Look out, wear your mask, and just stay healthy. That's the important thing to do right now.
Same to you.